diversity here, all the other panels.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Alex Rivera. I am the director of the Center for Economic and Workforce Development, Social Entrepreneurship, and Innovation at the John S. Watson Institute for Urban Policy and Research at King University. Not again. I can't do it again. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Hi, Morgan.
And I'm also the chair of the Garden State Preservation Trust, which is the steward of the preservation funds New Jersey collects through the corporate business tax. So today, the title of this session is Engaging Community and Local Government in Advancing Game-Changing Solutions for Food Production and Farming in New Jersey Cities. And we're going to review a few key recommendations from the Strategies for Urban Agriculture in New Jersey, published by our esteemed colleague Meredith Taylor, and discussion of the priority policy solutions for New Jersey's urban agriculture challenges, and talk about local land use and policy and how it impacts urban agriculture. So I'm going to give all my speakers a minute to introduce yourself. Please just say your name, your title, and your affiliation, please.
Good afternoon. Hi. Thank you, Alex. I'm Tom D'Alessio. I'm the executive director of the Musconetcong Watershed Association. I'm also the vice president of policy for the American Planning Association New Jersey chapter, and I'm a lecturer here at Rutgers University, the Blaustein School.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Morgan Devine, and I am the State Urban Conservationist for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS for short, and I cover the whole state of New Jersey.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chesha Hodge. I am a registered dietitian who also has the pleasure of working with the City of Newark within its Office of Sustainability as a Sustainable Food Systems Program Manager. Really long title, lots of stuff I do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Taylor. I'm a senior program administrator for the New Brunswick Community Farmers Market. I am based here at Rutgers, New Brunswick, in the Department of Human Ecology, and my office is on this campus.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So we were supposed to have Deacon Willie Davis from Patterson, but I guess he's not here. So unfortunately, we will have to go on without him. So to get started, Meredith, I wanted you to give an overview of the recommendations from your 2022 report that you think are most relevant to this session. So can you start off with that?
Sure. Last year, 2022, I spent most of that full year doing a very sort of broad stroke survey of urban agriculture producers. The idea here is that at the time, Secretary Fisher, who's subsequently retired from his post, but they're very interested in making investments in urban agriculture and understanding really what the needs are of people that are involved in growing food in cities. And so the report is long, and there's a link to it on our website, but the sort of summary of the report really is that there's a lot to do. But I felt it would be helpful to divide the work that has to be done into sort of plausible buckets, because no one organization can work across all dimensions, and certain things that really have to change so that structurally this work can happen and be successful for the largest number of people means that there are going to be things that have to be government-led. In terms of policy, there are buckets of work where Rutgers, my institution, has to step up and be more engaged in providing leadership around education and helping folks to experientially, who don't come from farming backgrounds, get the training and the resources that they need so that they can develop either successful nonprofit projects or make a go of commercial farming if that's their choice. And then there's a bucket of work that has to be led by the community, and that has to do with really understanding how the resources, the land resources in your community are allocated and what they're going to be used for, and how folks living in a particular city or town can be actively involved in making sure that land is preserved and that you apply the appropriate pressure to local civic leadership so that you can have a regime of regulation and ordinances and permissions that allow residents to do what they want to do with the land resource in their community. So there are certain key things in the report, like defining urban agriculture, which become a very complex problem and or process because the definitions vary depending on what your organization is doing, the scale of what you want to do, but also understanding that agriculture from a policy perspective at the government level has very specific meanings. And the people that are engaged in that are engaged largely in the commercial sector. Because farming, although some of you may not realize this, it's like the second biggest contributor to the gross domestic product of our New Jersey budget. We make a lot of money off agriculture, and that's not just fruits and vegetables. It's turf grass, it's horses, it's bedding plants. There are sectors of the agricultural, economy that we're actively engaged in, even if you're not aware of it, and it contributes significantly to the money that we raise. And when you think of our size compared to Midwestern states and far Western states, we're a powerhouse. Because if you look at some of the more popular things that we're growing, New Jersey, the fourth smallest state, will be number 3, number 2, number 5, number 1 at certain things, which is amazing considering the size of our state. Then there are issues related to training. I talked about this. Sent out a survey, tried as hard as I could to create, and everyone who's ever sent a survey understands, you think, everyone will love doing my survey, and then you're like having to call people like 100 times, please fill out the survey, I don't know what to say, I can't speak for the community, I need you to tell me what to say, I need to know what you're doing. So we did survey, and as much as I had hoped we'd have thousands of people, we had 150 or something responses. But the survey was specifically designed to get at what are growers' needs. What are you doing now? What are you growing now? What if you had to rank your needs, these are like 10 things. Tell me the top 3, top 4. Because Rutgers is actively engaged in, lifelong learning, designing through the cooperative extension services. There are programs that can be marketed specifically to help provide training and resources to folks that are engaged in this work. It's just not something that's top of mind. Even things like master gardening. I am a Cornell Cooperative Extension Master Gardener. New York is my home state that I come from. But I sat through weeks and weeks and weeks of stuff I didn't care about to do the 10 days that they do about fruits and vegetables. So I said, what if we created something that was specifically geared to urban growers who don't care that much about tea roses and turf grass. They really want to learn what they need to know to become more effective, more successful produce growers. So there is a piece of work within our own cooperative extension services, which reach almost every county, that Rutgers needs to be more deeply engaged in. So inside that report, you will see sort of in the appendices, you'll see, the questions that I asked, and there were summaries of responses, and we are internally now talking with Brian Schilling, who heads up our cooperative extension, about how to make this content not just available, but portable, so that we can bring it to you. It's nice to be here at the mothership, but this isn't as easy to get to for a lot of people. And what we want to make sure is that we eliminate or lower as many of the barriers to folks getting this education and training as possible. And then there's the community engagement piece. I've talked about this with a lot of my colleagues. How do we get folks who may be working 2 or 3 jobs, they've got just a lot going on in some of these communities, get them more engaged and being voices in their community to make sure that the land resources that are in your community are preserved for the things that you want them to be preserved for. So Newark is an example of a place that has a very long history of engagement, then disengagement. And now that the land that the city didn't want to take and was willing to give you for $1 a year, they want to take it back after you've added value to it, after you've grown on it and taken care of it. Now they want to put a parking lot on it or whatever else. And so being able to sort of reclaim some of these lots and preserve them in perpetuity for the things that the community wants to lead isn't something that the government can do for you. It's not something that Rutgers can do for you. This is something that the community itself is going to have to organize around, and we can backstop you and be there to help advocate with you. But I think right now that some of that work is somewhat fractured. And so one of the things that I wanted to emphasize in the report is how to divide the myriad of tasks that we have to accomplish together into appropriate buckets, and then everybody grab hold of their bucket and get busy. So.
Thank
that's
you,
it.
Meredith. Deacon Davis, I actually want to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about your kind of the organizing around land, right? So the question that I have for you is, can you tell us your story of land access and tenure at Green Acre Community Farm? What have been your experiences?
Okay. My experiences in Green Acre Community Garden is there is no funding. It's very hard to get funding because Green Acre Community Garden is a nonprofit, and we give the food out to the people free. We don't charge them for anything. But to get the finance that we need to keep the garden going has been one of the most difficult things for the last 10 years to do. Oh my God, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm trying to keep everything in perspective, and I don't want to put nobody, in the spotlight. But when you're a farmer, a small-scale farmer, which I have about an acre of land, right? And it's hard to get grants. When I say hard, I mean in the past 10 years, if we got 5 grants, we got 5 grants. And those were small-scale grants. Not enough to even run a garden for a year. I'll just tell you a little bit. Can I just go a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What I had to do in the first few years were great because City Green came in and they helped support it and helped get it started. And that was a great opportunity for me. But then after the 3 years period, now I need funding to keep the garden going, keep it growing, because we start with 3 beds, now I got 48 beds, and we have trees, apple tree, pear tree, plum tree, grapevine, you name it, it's there. But anyway, what I'm saying is this, I had to go out and work, because I did construction work, so I contracted jobs first couple of years, after the 2 years, and I was working contract plus doing the garden. I would come into the garden around 6 o'clock in the morning, work till 10 o'clock. Then I would go on my job, and I work till 7, 8 o'clock at night. Then I would go home. So this went on for a year and a half. But it got to a point where I could not do it. I either had to give up the job or give up the farming. And I'll tell you something, I would not give up my farm. Because it's very important, because it's a food desert, and we need this for our people. With the program that we have, I don't want to go too deep right now, but the farm in Patterson is very important. It's in the 4th ward. It's in the place where people say, you can't do this, you can't do that. We're not going to help you. But you know what? The farm is growing. We have a greenhouse that we grow now during the wintertime, which we need funding. And that's another scale. When I say a scale, it's hard. But I have some supporter. I tell you this, that helped me. I have Claudius, she's not here now. And I have Darius, which have his own farm now in Jersey City. And I have Renata, she's somewhere around here. She's in the next room. And she had helped me. And I'll tell you something, those few people in Habitat, City Green, United Way, I'll tell you something, they have helped me. That's why they're going, still going. Okay, that's enough on that.
Thank you, Deacon Davis. Tom, I'd like to turn it over to you because in a previous session, we talked about some of the challenges that people have, the zoning and land use regulations at the local level that are kind of a barrier to urban ag. And, Deacon Davis did mention that maybe the city has not been as helpful as it possibly could be. So I wanted to turn over to you to ask you, what are some of the opportunities you see for zoning and land use changes at the local government level to support urban agriculture?
Thank you, Alex. Sky's the limit. You know, it's basically, it's your government. It's your opportunity to actually engage sort of going through. What you're living with, for the most part, are master plans and in most cases zoning ordinances that go back 50, 60, 70 years going through. And I dare say if you ask anyone who sits on a planning board or a zoning board to explain what a specific component of a master plan or zoning ordinance is, they can't do it. Most folks can't even read a site plan going through. So your charge really is to go back to your municipalities and to your counties and basically ask how they can change the system that actually makes things better for you. Let me take you back a couple of years. 1964, the World's Fair, there was actually the craft exhibit, and I'm young enough or old enough to remember that going through. And that's where they started talking about urban agriculture, as in horticulture, you know, hydroponics, et cetera, as that's the future. That's not necessarily what you all are talking about, I sense. What I sense a lot of we're talking about here is how do we use the land, especially in urban areas, to create farm-to-table opportunities, the same way suburban and rural areas are looking at it. In our area, in Musconetcong Watershed Association, we're looking at how to encourage opportunities for regenerative agriculture. And I have my friends at Resource and Conservation Development here, and they're great partners in that effort. You should be applying the same type of strategies we are, which is how do you use the land and actually regenerate the land in ways that can better work for you. So it can be anything from, if you have a vacant parcel, are there opportunities to actually, in the master plan, in the ordinances, and in the capital improvement programs that towns put together, to say that we'll put our money where our mouth is. Towns actually should be encouraging and supplying you with the resources to do the agriculture that you think can work. Are there opportunities in development, redevelopment opportunities that come about, that we can tear up some of these parking lots and actually bring back opportunities to grow and to encourage agriculture in areas that have been industrialized? I recognize that it may not be the same soil, and we obviously have to do testing and make sure that everything is safe going through, but regenerative agriculture could also apply in urban areas, bringing back places. Are there opportunities to actually encourage along riverfronts and others to do things that can not only encourage and clean up the water and our rivers going through, but maybe to also provide opportunities for agricultural enterprises as we're going through? And last but not least, if I may, Alex, in all of this, I had the extreme honor 25 years ago, actually, of working in the governor's office and actually writing the bill to preserve 1 million more acres of open space, farmland, and historic sites in New Jersey. And in that effort, we heard from folks who argued that nonprofits could develop land for parks in rural and suburban areas, but not in urban areas. And I said, that's crazy. So we actually wrote the law to allow that provision. So a lot of the park development we see in Newark, Patterson, Jersey City, Camden, others, came as a result of that effort. We did not include that same type of provision for agriculture. We need to do that. Alex and I know a couple of people. We all need to start talking about how we can pay attention to that and then take that the next step and say, it may cost a little bit more to buy land in urban areas for agriculture, but let's do true full cost accounting on all this and do a life cycle cost. If we have to have the farms, and we do, we're the Garden State, we should have farms throughout the state, but what are the transportation costs? What are the processing costs? Are we actually even bringing the food from other areas in New Jersey to where people live and work? And if there's an economy of scale that we can do by actually encouraging urban agriculture in a very concerted way, that's important. And I guess the last point to raise is, I'm also a person who's done studies and research here at Rutgers in the New Jersey State Policy Lab. So about 6 months ago, we released a report on the 25th anniversary of the Governor's Council on New Jersey Outdoors report, which called for the preservation of 1 million more acres in New Jersey. And we did analysis. And right now, we're only about 350,000 acres towards that 1 million acre goal. at this rate, after 25 years, I'll be long gone before we get to that. The Department of Agriculture has identified the need for 500,000 acres of farmland to preserve an agricultural industry as an economy in New Jersey. So we're 500,000, 250,000 acres short on that. We better start looking in urban areas and other areas. And if it does cost a little bit more, let's think about that full life cycle cost, and let's make that part of our goal too.
Thank you, Tom. Chesha, I want to turn it over to you to ask you about the challenges that you are seeing and growers are experiencing in Newark with land and market access, kind of to speak to some of what Tom said.
I preface this by saying, I speak on behalf of Chesha Hodge, not the city of Newark. Okay? Okay. I see heads nodding. Yes. Okay. So I have I'm going to say the pleasure of living in Newark, playing in Newark, working in Newark, representing Newark, having a small little plot of land through the Adopt-A-Lot program, which I get to grow in Newark, and also be afforded the opportunity to work with the city, right? A contract with the city. I am speaking on behalf of Chesha Hodge and not the city of Newark. When you talk about the challenges that we're faced, it's something that far exceeds at times the capacity and the will that growers have to stay the course. And sometimes it seems as if it's for no reason. Many of our growers have land afforded to them through the Adopt-A-Lot program. And if you consider and think about the history of the Adopt-A-Lot program, that was just for the purpose of beautification, right? Let's take all these dumping grounds and we'll have these lots, and hopefully we'll have people that can afford $1 to be able to beautify these spaces. And we have had innovative individuals who have the ability to make $1 out of 15 cents, right? To make something that is small and dilapidated into something that is beautiful and has the ability to not only feed themselves, but to be able to feed their families and to be able to feed their neighborhood. While you were speaking, it kind of dawned on me, which is a bit delayed, is that the city doesn't benefit from this at all. Municipal government doesn't benefit.
They benefit.
Fiscally.
Right.
Okay? So if I am, and this has been through conversations that I have had with certain folks when trying to acquire more land or more space, because it doesn't necessarily have to be land as far as, breaking ground, but more space for growing, and was told right out that this plot is worth $1 million. I can't trade that for $1. Okay? So it makes the challenge very real to what we're working with. And to have that aspect of reality that it can be difficult to get municipal buy-in because there is no fiscal return, immediate fiscal return from this space, then we then have to take on a different way of thinking and really see this as an opportunity, because when you look at the 3-page lease, right, it allows you to do a lot, relatively speaking. And you get to actually keep anything that you grow on that space, right? That is an opportunity for income. That's an opportunity for food sharing that the city is not taxing you on. So you have to kind of have an entrepreneurial approach. And I think if anything the city can do, if they would, because again, they're not making any money off of it, right? Not making any money off of this, is to really support the business-mindedness of those individuals that have access to this land, so that they can take advantage of the plots that they have for the time that they have it before it gets taken away from them. And also be able to acknowledge the emotional distraught that comes along with pouring into something, pouring your time in, and I'm speaking for myself, right? I'm speaking for myself of purchasing signage and putting in the actual labor to till and to produce, and pouring into this space to possibly the next year you don't even have it anymore and it's owned by somebody else. So if the city were able to really support that emotional phase, that emotional distraught that's faced, in a way of not, man, I'm trying to be so careful with the words that I use, not in an effort to coddle, but to be very forthright and transparent, because we don't have enough of that either, right? To know exactly what you're getting into, and sometimes repetition is helpful, because if you reach out to your municipal government for this particular plot, and I'll wrap it up soon, and you don't hear from anyone from the city, you kind of not necessarily forget, but you get very caught up in the work that you're doing. And there is no constant contact. There is no checking in, but there's definitely a sweeping of under, right? You'll have the rug swept under you. So in being transparent and letting a person know that you're gonna give probably a lot more than you're able to get, it may be very beneficial for you to have an entrepreneurial-based mind to use this land until you can't use it no more. And I will end there.
Thank you, Chesha.
You're very welcome.
You want to say something, Deacon Davis?
Just kicking back on what you're talking about, the land trust. Okay, Green Acre Community Garden is an acre of land, and I was farming it for 3 years. And Florio Management came to the garden and started putting up stakes. Yeah, started putting up stakes, they're going to build a house on my land that I was farming for 3 years, which I thought was mine. So I can find out Florio owning it, that plot. So I went to his office and talked to him. He wanted $35,000 for a 25 by 100 lot. This is what he wanted. So he said he see what I was doing, so he said, well, I'll let you have it for $30,000.
Is that Florio, like the same Florio that used to be the governor here?
No, Florio, the management. Yeah, the management. Yeah. Not that one. Not that one. And what happened?
You was about to get Florio in trouble.
Yeah, not that one.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
I'm a New Yorker, so I am from by birth, so I hear a name. Oh, I know that name. I'm sorry, I apologize.
So what happened was this. There's a lady called Mary Clark. She is a very strong-minded woman, spiritual bound, and she loved community. She loved God, and she loved it. So she came on site and told me that she will donate $30,000 for that, so I can own that. Excuse me, I get a little bit choked up a little bit. But what I'm saying this, okay, at the time I was doing my 501(c), and where it was almost finished, not quite finished. So Habitat said, well, we can go through them, and when my 501(c) come through, they will turn it over to Green Acre Community Garden. So Green Acre Community Garden will own part of the land, and Habitat on the other part of the land. So we had a land trust thing going on there. And plus, I went downtown, put this in stone. Green Acre Community Garden cannot be, no houses cannot be built on Green Acre Community Garden. I made sure that when he gave me, not when he But when he gave me the dream, the vision for this lot, he said, in order for you to keep this lot, you have to put it in foundation. And foundation means go to the city and get everything written up. That now that garden is set as a monument for growing green for the rest of the time. Cannot build on it. So that's one good thing that Green Acre Community Garden do have. And so now we import the ownership of Green Acre Community Garden. And Habitat support me. The garden support the people now better than they ever did before. So I just want to say that. I'm sorry, y'all. I get a little choked up. Okay, I just had to say this.
That's a beautiful story, Deacon Davis. Thank you for sharing that. Morgan, I want to turn it over to you, and I have a two-part question for you. So one, how do your NRCS or USDA?
It's USDA NRCS.
Okay. How do your programs support urban and small-scale growers? And also, how do local level challenges that urban agriculture practitioners face impact their ability to access your services and resources?
Yeah, those are great questions. And the second part's really going to kind of tie into what's already been said here. But basically, so for those of you who are not familiar, so NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, we are an agency underneath the USDA. So we offer financial and technical assistance to farmers. Doesn't matter the size. If it's 0.001 acre up to 1,000 acres, private landowners, nonprofits, we're even now getting into being able to help with municipalities with some of our community garden grants and things like that. But we have a wide variety of both technical assistance, like going out and doing soil screening for heavy metals. We don't necessarily give the advice on like what you should grow and your nutrients. We're kind of more addressing the resource concerns. So we're also not in the business of establishing farms. So if, we get a lot of people in or that are brand new and they need a lot of help, we're really there to offer assistance with conservation practices on established farms. As long as you're growing something, when we go out there, we can assist. And we have a lot of different practices that we can help with, from high tunnels to low tunnels to cover crops to irrigation. That's just to name a few. We've got tree plantings. We can help with invasive species removal. There's a wide list of things that we can do. And recently, I would say, we've always had a focus on farmers. Traditionally, that's been more of a conventional sense, where we're focusing on what you would think of even like corn and soybeans or large-scale veggie farms. And in the last Farm Bill in 2018 and in recent years, we've realized like our programs are not working for small-scale and urban, because we might be paying someone by the acre on cover crop, and then if you're at a small farm, we're giving you $2 for your cover crop payment. It doesn't make any sense. So we've really been tweaking our programs. Now we have small cost rates. So we pay by things up by the square foot on a lot of our practices. So that's one way that we've kind of tweaked our programs. We've been earmarking funds specifically for beginner farmers, for what we call socially disadvantaged farmers, for urban growers. We have allocated funds that go in their own funding pool. So when you apply, you're not competing with every farmer in the state. You can go into those fund pools. But we are open to anyone and everyone, regardless of your size. There's no income requirement, anything like that. But to get into some of the challenges, a lot of what we've talked about here, zoning, permitting, land access, all of that impacts someone's ability to engage in our programs. So just as an example, high tunnels are very common. People like high tunnels. For those of you who aren't familiar, a lot of people call them greenhouses, but the difference is you're actually growing in the native soil profile. There's no concrete, anything like that. So high tunnels are pretty common for both large and small scale farmers. The problem is, in New Jersey, we have over 500 municipalities, and each municipality has their own zoning rules. And if you're a small farmer or you're in a more residential area or an urban area, even if we call that cropland, your municipality zoning is not, they probably call it developed land, residential, et cetera, and you have to go by their zoning. So if to qualify for that, for our assistance, you have to get a permit. In some townships, that's really easy. In other townships, it's not at all. And we've actually been able to assist with some mediation for some of our farmers, like when they have to go to the township. We can provide literature and information, but we can also go and help. We've had some of these become like right to farm issues because the township doesn't quite understand, I think, what a high tunnel is. They think it's something permanent, and we consider it something temporary, right? So that's a huge struggle. Also, in certain areas, like with the Adopt-A-Lot program, they don't have city water hookup, and they can't get those infrastructure that we would require to do things like help pay for irrigation. Because under our engineering standards, we don't want to pay for irrigation if it's being connected to a cistern. We don't see that as like a stable source. So that's a huge barrier. Another thing is just, the land longevity and access. As of right now, we have to have our participants show that they have access of land. That's usually through a lease or a deed if you own the land, but if you're renting or you have an agreement, it's usually through a lease or some sort of written agreement that can prove to us that you have control of land for the lifespan of the contract. If you're on an Adopt-A-Lot and you only have it for a year, that's a huge challenge to prove to us, and that's prevented a lot of people from being able to access our programs. And one thing I would love to do, and it takes a grassroots effort that I can't organize, but I would love to come to the table and assist, is going to some of these townships and cities maybe and showing them, we have federal dollars that we can pump in through our financial assistance programs to cities like Newark or anywhere, and that's taxable. The money that we give to participants, they get a 1099, they pay taxes on it, and it's being pumped into the local economy. But because of some of these constraints, we're not able to do that. So I think if we could maybe kind of word it like that when we're talking to towns and cities about our programs, like, hey, we could potentially be pumping some money. It's still a pretty small drop in the bucket compared to $1 million. We're talking maybe thousands of dollars per project, but still it's money that could be being pumped into the city or pumped into the township or whatever, and because of these limitations, your farmers aren't able to access it. So I think a lot of people that make the decisions in townships and cities, they don't necessarily know a lot about growing, and they don't understand what some of these structures are that we're trying to build, and I think that's where a lot of the red tape comes from. And as Meredith said about, like, earlier, she made a comment like maybe like the government can't do that for you, but we could help advocate for you. If you're working with a township and you have an issue, we can help advocate for you. So I think those are some of the biggest ones. Another thing I wanted to mention while I'm talking is, if you're under 5 acres in the state, you can't get preserved. And one thing that we're looking at doing is we have a federal easement program called agricultural land easement. And of course, it really wouldn't work for like an Adopt-A-Lot. You'd have to probably own the land or work with a nonprofit who owns the land. But we're trying to see if we can use that program on small farms to help get that into a lifetime easement. So if you are growing and you have a small farm, maybe we could use this program to supplement the fact that you can't be preserved by the state, but it could be like a federal preservation. So that is a program we have available. It does have its constraints. Like right now, only I think 10% of the land can be impervious, which is hard sometimes in the city whenever you have like a farm stand or something. So we're working trying to see if we can have some more leeway with that nationally. But that's a program that maybe we're trying to see if there could be some use, like in urban and small settings, just to keep that land from being developed and to keep it, where it's always going to be growing. And that's a federal easement. So that's another thing I wanted to mention as well.
Thank you, Morgan. And to the point of grassroots efforts, I did have a specific question I want to direct to somebody, and then I want to open it up to comments and questions. So when I have a question about farmland preservation, I go to my friend Jeff over here, and there are many counties and municipalities that have committees that can be formed to work on some of these issues, and I wanted Jeff to talk a little bit about agricultural development boards at the county level.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for those who heard me this morning. I apologize. I don't sound like a broken record, but there's 2 pieces of legislation you should know about, and Tom knows the history. 1983 was the Right to Farm Act, which created the State Ag Development Committee. And that same year was the Ag Retention Development Act. What that means is if you qualify for right to farm protection, you can preempt local zoning and you can conduct your agricultural operation as long as you're using sound agricultural practices. That could get to some of your issues if, in fact, you could deploy right to farm. The law says now, and I'll get to your question in a second, because county ag development boards are part and parcel of administering this program. It's not just the state. It's through the county ag development boards. Right to Farm Act, if you have over 5 acres, that's easier. If you have under 5 acres, you have to make at least $50,000 a year in income. The point being, anything can be changed. I've been in government 30 years. You get the right people. I think you have some willing legislators, especially in North Jersey, perhaps around Camden, perhaps Trenton, we'll see, that could make some adjustments. And Morgan mentioned it, that 5 acres was critical. But what about seeing farmland preservation beyond the rural context and in an urban context? So $1.6 billion has been spent on farmland preservation in New Jersey. But where did the farms start in New Jersey? Where were your first farms historically? In the cities, right? Because you didn't have transportation to bring, you had to produce dairy products right there next to the city. You didn't have the transportation we know now, and the dairy farms are 50 miles from the cities. So anyway, with the county ag development boards, there's 18 of them in the state, and they're formed by the counties. Nothing prevents you from forming ones in Hudson, Essex, and Union. That's the other 3. You could do that today. So what keeps me up at night, Alex, is things that are tangible, things we could do right now to deploy farmland preservation and right to farm in urban areas. And the statutory construct's already there. Alex sits on the Garden State Preservation Trust, as Tom mentioned. And I believe that's the act you were talking about from 25 years ago. I think if you look at New Jersey, agriculture in New Jersey, it's not Iowa. It's diverse constituency, and it's urban. That's who we are. We're 40% urban, which is the highest by far of any state in the country. So that's, I get frustrated that we could do this and we could do it now. And today I see people very passionate, and they want access to land, they want it bad. So let's get it to them.
Thank you, Jeff. So all of y'all take a note. County agricultural development boards for Hudson, Essex, and Union County, highly urbanized counties. And I know, many municipalities you're coming from municipalities in those counties, and you need a way to kind of organize and advocate for what you need to advocate for. I think that's a primary way to do that. All right, so I want to open it up for comments and questions from the audience.
I have 2 questions for Morgan. One is that I know the NRCS is getting a lot of money coming soon, and I'm wondering if there is a potential for expanding the services that are offered to include actual on-the-ground technical assistance. For example, when folks qualify to get a high tunnel installed but don't really know how to install it, there are not really companies available to assist with that installation, and sometimes folks end up fumbling through it unless they're fortunate enough to know someone who's taken a class or who's put a few in. What do you think are the possibilities around getting technical assistance or funding to support training troops of folks who can become the people who go around and install high tunnels?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I love your Chicago shirt. I'm from Indiana, so close to home. So I think what you're mentioning, you say we're getting a lot of money coming in. I'm sure that might be in regards to the Inflation Reduction Act. We're getting all of this money. That money is specifically earmarked, and it is mostly going to technical assistance. We got almost $12 million this year specifically for our program implementation, but it's geared towards specific practices. And they have to be climate smart practices. They have to show that they sequester carbon or that they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So a high tunnel is actually not one of the climate smart practices. That being said, we're still getting our funding through traditional programs that can cover high tunnels. But unfortunately, I don't foresee us being able to fill that gap financially, potentially through grants. We have some grant programs outside of our normal financial assistance program that could potentially help with something like that, like trying to figure out how to train people, because it is a big problem. I do have a comprehensive list, for what it's worth. If you're interested, if you shoot me your email, I do have a comprehensive list that we've put together over the years of contractors that can help with high tunnels. So I know that's not really an answer to your question. I don't know. So financially, we do try to, when we do our cost rates, and one thing I will say, so let's say you apply for a high tunnel, and that might be let's say $6, $7 per square foot. And whenever we come up with that calculation of how we get that, we do take into account the labor it costs as well. So whether or not you install it yourself or you pay someone, you're always going to get that same $6 or $7 per square foot. It's not going to change. But we like to think that it should account, they've done studies, they came up with that somehow, and part of that is considering some of the labor costs. So we try to compensate some of that within the rate that already exists for the high tunnel. But yeah, no, I know it's difficult, and there aren't a lot of individuals. Even the list that I have, the people who sell high tunnels, I mean, that's like a 4-page list. And then when you get to the people, the contractors, I think there's like maybe 6 or 7 on there. So it's not a huge list, but it could be a start. And I'd be happy to share that. But that is a really good point. I think, though, outside of like specialty grants within our normal allocation from Congress, that's something that we probably couldn't cover.
That's something that we've actually been able to help with in the past. In my year that I sort of straddled before I officially came on board here, as a faculty person, I was bringing with me projects that we did in East Orange and another one in Camden. And through relationships that we had with the Farm Bureau and a specialty crop block grant, Pete Fury was able to pull a piece of money out of that and support urban high tunnel development. So this issue about the technical capacity to put it up is exactly what our portable workshop modules would look like, and it's part of what internally this institution needs to lean all the way in on. So there are things that you can do with your funding, but again, through cooperative extension, we need to be addressing the needs of people in each county. And if a high tunnel workshop is something that y'all want, we should be able to. We have some of the top greenhouse people in the country that work here. I've actually been able to use them to put up a high tunnel in East Orange. So we did one in Essex County. I should be able to marshal those resources from my institution to help. So Morgan and I can have a conversation, and I will take this conversation to Brian Schilling, and we can talk about what kind of workshops would be most useful for you all as we kind of roll into next season. But this is an easy, solvable problem. That the funding piece is something else, but again, we could lean into relationships that we've had in the past where they have been able to peel off 20,000, 10,000, whatever, to provide like a process through which if you all need some additional funding, we could go to the appropriate agencies and say, could you tack on a little bit of extra in your specialty crop block grant and earmark it for our urban high tunnel development? They did it before, it was very successful. We could certainly ask and see if they could do it again.
Thank you. My second question is also for Morgan, and it's around, is this thing working? Hello? Okay, I just didn't have it close enough. The second question is around the conservation stewardship program and payments that are given to farmers. And as I understand, there are new minimums that apply. And I'd like to know more about how in urban agriculture those growers can tap into those payments for conservation practices they're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because if I can put a plug in for our CSP program, that'd be great. So CSP is our Conservation Stewardship Program. Typically, this is a program that we see as kind of like the next level when you've already addressed a lot of your resource concerns, maybe through our other programs, and you're doing a lot of good stewardship on your own or through us, but it could even be on your own. You might qualify for CSP. So originally, our CSP minimum payment used to be $1,500 annually. It has increased to $4,000 annually this year. And to qualify, you do have to already be meeting certain resource concerns. So if we go out to your farm and there's still a lot that needs to be done. There's the erosion, the soil quality is really poor. We might want to get you into one of our earlier programs first to work on some of those issues. But to be honest, a lot of urban growers, whether or not they're certified organic, are doing a lot of practices that help us meet those resource concerns already. A lot of you are already cover cropping. A lot of you are already mulching. A lot of you are already doing some kind of, a lot of practices that get you to where you need to be to meet those thresholds. So the program is very intricate, and I'm not going to get into all of what you need to do to for your land to qualify. But like I said, you have to be already meeting some certain resource concerns, and then we have to implement practices that'll help you exceed resource concerns. So it's definitely a possibility for urban, and I would love to see that expand. So if you're interested in CSP, please feel free to reach out to me and I can get you in contact with your field offices. I only have a couple cards left, but my email is just morgan.devine, DEVINE, @usda.gov. Because from what I've seen with small growers, a lot of the small growers we work with are already doing a lot of really good stewardship practices that would get them to meet that threshold. And even if you're just doing a small practice, like maybe let's do some pollinator planting, or even low tunnels, or all you have to do is a practice or an enhancement. It could be either or. And that's a program that we're also working on training our staff on that program, because EQIP is kind of our bread and butter and it takes a lot of our focus. That's another financial assistance program we have. So we're working on trying to train our staff on CSP, and part of that's going to be talking to them about small farmers and urban farmers and seeing how that program can better apply there. So thank you for bringing that up. Definitely potential. And yeah, the minimum payment now is $4,000 a year, so you would get that. So sorry to keep talking about it. One thing I will say is our rates for practices tend to be a little bit lower in CSP than they do in like our EQIP program. However, you're getting that $4,000 annual payment. So even if you're getting a smaller rate for that pollinator plot or a smaller rate for that field border, hopefully that $4,000 minimum payment helps to supplement that, and you get that through the longevity of the contract. So it's a multiple year payment. So please feel free to reach out.
Hi, Jasmine with City Green. I had a couple of comments. I wanted to, because I know a lot of people here were asking about getting land and access to land. And to speak specifically to something that we have in Patterson is not a lot of vacant lots, right? They're all owned. Deacon Davis's property is owned by Florio and Habitat for Humanity, but we are working with Habitat and other gardeners in Patterson, because it actually really is a unique model. Habitat owns property in Patterson. They do not feel compelled to build a house on every single lot that they own. They are happy to have a community garden, and also are able to sponsor parts of community garden through their whatever tax credit situation that they get for certain neighborhoods. So if there's a Habitat project in your neighborhood, liaise with them. They're a really strong nonprofit partner. It fits their SEPTED needs in order to have community gardens and growing on Habitat-owned lots. Similarly, a lot of projects that we work with are also based on faith-based institutions who we know also in New Jersey own a lot of property with no plans of development. So those are other spaces. There's a lot of lawn in Patterson, and they're all in front of a church. All the biggest lawns in Patterson are attached to churches. And then to speak specifically, some programs that I didn't hear talked about today, but I think that somebody next time around would probably be able to speak really clearly about green acres and open spaces, and how those programs are used to preserve property that are smaller than 5 acres, like our Farm Echo Center in Clifton, that is 5 acres, including the parking lot, so it doesn't meet the 5-acre production minimum. But that property was preserved with green acres and with open space funding, and we are farming on that property currently, because it was a farm previously, but it did not qualify for farmland preservation. And just to add one more thing for people to think about is that in Passaic County specifically, nonprofits are eligible for open space funding. And that's not the case in Essex County. So City Green actually is able to utilize this public funding, and we re-grant out. Used to be farmland preservation in Passaic County. They did away with all the farmland preservation funding because there are no farms to preserve in Passaic County, and there's no more going in. They transfer that to open space, but City Green was getting this farmland preservation money years back in order to re-grant and distribute to people who wanted to start their own gardens in the name of agriculture and growing food. So that money got moved into open space in Passaic County, and we still are able to access that funding in order to support the agriculture that we're doing in the county of Passaic.
Jasmine, one of the things people should do a little bit of homework about. One of the things people should do a little bit of homework about with Green Acres specifically is what you can and can't do on the land.
Yes.
Your site was probably grandfathered because it was an existing farm.
Another one, they need to be here because if you spoke to somebody from the Farm Bureau, they would tell you that there's lots of growing happening on Green Acres properties. We get a hard time on one of our sites, another site we got less of a hard time, but then there's people in South Jersey who are just have high tunnels and are growing.
Right. It's but this is back to the issue related to right to farm, because because Greater Newark Conservancy was allowed to put up their high tunnels, and then they weren't allowed to put plastic on them. And we were like, what the heck is that? Like, who ever heard of such a thing? It's crazy. So this is what I mean about doing your homework, because where you live is going to determine what you can and can't do.
A lot of county rules are easy to change, though.
No question, no question. It's just the legwork you have to,
You have to do, it takes a lot of work.
legwork
It takes
is,
a lot of work.
This is a hot condo, I love it.
I can weigh in. So Green Acres could be, I can see why it's attractive because they do preserve smaller spaces. I think when it comes to actually developing the property for agriculture, that's where the rub is. They typically like to keep it unencumbered from improvements. However, local open space funds, there's a structure for that. And in the open space fund and enabling legislation, you can actually specify those funds be used for agriculture. And in fact, they do one better, that legislation. It says you can actually, the county can actually farm that out to a nonprofit to act in their stead. So that might be the hook you need in certain localities that do support urban agriculture, is to use the local open space funds. Ideally, you get the state funds and you get federal funds on top of it, but at least you have a couple options here. It's just trying to lay all this out, and I'd love to see a white paper that lays all
and
this
that
out.
you could do in Essex, because Jody
right.
has a farm. It's up 280, going towards Livingston. There's a sign for it on the side of the road. Something, I know, right?
That's local, so a municipality
Something
or a
Farm
county.
Road, there's like 7 acres
Yeah.
of preserved land. That's in
Confusing.
Essex.
So some of you may live in municipalities with open space taxes. If you have an open space tax assessment, you have an open space board. So get familiar with your open space board. All counties have open space boards. Some have agricultural development boards. As we mentioned, I would second the caution with state Green Acres funds because of the issue of development. But I think that there's a lot more flexibility and opportunity when it comes to county and municipal. I know we were supposed to end. All right, we gotta go. Janine said we gotta go.
Really, what would be very important for this session is to come up with just, like, I know there's no time for it now, but like, we really need to come up with some next steps, like what, and so what's the call to action for, do we need a white paper? Do we need to lay out a set of instructions on this and that? So we can talk about that offline.
Yeah.
But like any input that other people have, panelists have, like if you have takeaways about what the next step should be, that's what the point of today is. So really, please try to send those to us. Or, right, thank you.
Thank you.